All right.
Hello, Shiver Seekers. Are you ready to follow us into the unknown? I'm Cynthia.
And this is Stephanie. You have found the Dark Oak in the Oaktober Fest special edition. Happy Halloween!
Happy Halloween. It's the day before Halloween, right?
It is the day before Halloween, but there's no bonus episode tomorrow, guys. Sorry, this is it. So it's Halloween Eve. Happy Halloween Eve!
Happy Halloween Eve. And on today's episode, we are going to discuss the very appropriate for Halloween Eve mysterious death of Edgar Allan Poe.
Mysterious death, Edgar Allan Poe. I'm here for it.
You can't get more Halloween themed than this episode. In fact, I'm really bringing it because for the first time ever, I'm going to be telling the campfire story.
I can't wait. And appropriately, both of us are wearing black. I actually have my dark oak black shirt on. You have your dark dress on. We are ready.
We are ready for all things spooky and scary. And as a special treat, and because it's appropriate for this episode, our campfire story today is going to be a short story by Edgar Allan Poe.
Which is a campfire story. He's a whole campfire story vibe.
He is. Now, if you're not familiar with our campfire stories, normally Stephanie brings us a couple minute long little spooky story to help get you in the mood. They're fun to share with kids, fun to share around your dinner table, just fun for Halloween. Most of the time they just last a couple minutes. I will tell you, because it's Poe, it's a little longer. So this story is going to be about 8 or 9 minutes. But I would encourage you not to skip over it because it's very on brand with today's episode. You really need to hear it. Are we ready?
I'm so ready. Cue the crickets.
Today's story is called The Cask of Amontillado. The 1,000 injuries of Fortunato I had borne as best I could, but when he ventured upon insult, I vowed revenge. You, who so well know the nature of my soul, will not suppose, however, that I gave utterance to a threat. At length I would be avenged. This was a point definitively settled, but the very definitiveness with which it was resolved precluded the idea of risk. I must not only punish, but punish with impunity. A wrong is unredressed when retribution overtakes its redresser. It is equally unredressed when the avenger fails to make himself felt as such to him who has done the wrong. It must be understood that neither by word nor deed had I given Fortunato cause to doubt my goodwill. I continued, as was my wont, to smile in his face, and he did not perceive that my smile now was at the thought of his immolation. He had a weak point, this Fortunato. Although in other regards he was a man to be respected and even feared, he prided himself on his connoisseurship in wine. Few Italians have the true virtuoso spirit. For the most part, their enthusiasm is adopted to suit the time and opportunity, to practice imposture upon the British and Austrian millionaires. In painting and gimmery, Fortunato, like his countrymen, was a quack. But in the matter of old wines, he was sincere. In this respect, I did not differ from him materially. I was skillful in the Italian vintages myself, and bought largely whenever I could. It was about dusk one evening during the supreme madness of the carnival season that I encountered my friend. He accosted me with excessive warmth, for he had been drinking much. The man wore motley. He had on a tight-fitting party-striped dress, and his head was surmounted by the conical cap and bells. I was so pleased to see him that I thought I should never have done wringing his hand. I said to him, "My dear Fortunato, you are luckily met. How remarkably well you are looking today. But I have received a pipe of what passes for Amontillado, and I have my doubts." "How?" said he. "Amontillado? A pipe? Impossible! And in the middle of the carnival?" "I have my doubts," I replied, "and I was silly enough to pay the full Amontillado price without consulting you in the matter. You were not to be found, and I was fearful of losing a bargain." "Amontillado?" "I have my doubts." Amontillado? And I must satisfy them. Amontillado? As you are engaged, I am on my way to Lucchesi. If anyone has a critical turn, it is he. He will tell me. Lucchesi cannot tell Amontillado from sherry. And yet some fools will have it that his taste is a match to your own. Come, let us go. Whither? To your vaults. My friend, no. I will not impose upon your good nature. I perceive you have an engagement. Lucchesi, I have no engagement. Come. My friend, no, it is not the engagement, but the severe cold with which I perceive you are afflicted. The vaults are insufferably damp. They are encrusted with nitre. Let us go, nevertheless. The cold is merely nothing. Amontillado, you have been imposed upon. And as for Lucchesi, he cannot distinguish cherry from Amontillado. Thus speaking, Fortunato possessed himself on my arm. Putting on a mask of black silk and drawing a roquelaire closely about my person, I suffered him to hurry me to my palazzo. There were no attendants at home. They had absconded to make merry in honor of the time. I had told them that I should not return until the morning, and had given them explicit orders not to stir from the house. These orders were sufficient, I well knew, to ensure their immediate disappearance, one and all, as soon as my back was turned. I took from their sconces 2 flambeaux, and giving one to Fortunato, bowed him through several suites of rooms to the archway that led into the vaults. I passed down a long and winding staircase, requesting him to be cautious as he followed. We came at length to the foot of the descent, and stood together on the damp ground of the catacombs of the Montresors. The gait of my friend was unsteady, and the bells upon his cap jingled as he strode. "The pipe," said he. "It is farther on," said I. "But observe the white webwork which gleams from these cavern walls." He turned towards me and looked into my eyes with 2 filmy orbs that distilled the rheum of intoxication. "Nitre?" he asked. "Nitre," I replied. "How long have you had that cough?" My poor friend found it impossible to reply for many minutes. "It is nothing," he said at last. "Come," I said with decision. "We will go back. Your health is precious. You are rich, respected, admired, beloved. You are happy, as once I was. You are a man to be missed. For me it is no matter. We will go back. You will be ill, and I cannot be responsible. Besides, there is Lucchesi." "Enough," he said. "The cough is a mere nothing. It will not kill me. I shall not die of a cough." "True, true," I replied. "And indeed, I had no intention of alarming you unnecessarily. But you should use all proper caution. A draught of this medic will defend us from the damps." Here I knocked off the neck of a bottle, which I drew from a long row of its fellows that lay upon the mold. "Drink," I said, presenting him the wine. He raised it to his lips with a leer. He paused and nodded to me familiarly, while his bells jingled. "I drink," he said, "to the buried that repose around us." "And I to your long life." He again took my arm, and we proceeded. "These vaults," he said, "are extensive." "The Montresors," I replied, "were a great and numerous family." "I forget your arms." "A huge human foot, d'or in a fil d'azur. The foot crushes a serpent rampant, whose fangs are embedded in the heel." "And the motto?" "Nemo me impune licescent." "Good," he said. The wine sparkled in his eye, and the bells jingled. My own fancy grew warm with the medic. We had passed through walls of piled bones, with casks and puncheons intermingling, into the inmost recesses of the catacombs. I paused again, and this time I made bold to seize Fortunato by an arm above the elbow. "The nitre," I said. "See, it increases. It hangs like moss upon the vaults. We are below the river's bed. The drops of moisture trickle among the bones. Come, we will go back, ere it's too late. Your cough." "It is nothing," he said. "Let us go on. But first, another draught of the medic." I broke and reached him a flacon of de Grave. He emptied it at breath. His eyes flashed with a fierce light. He laughed and threw the bottle upwards with a gesticulation I did not understand. I looked at him in surprise. He repeated the movement, a grotesque one. "You do not comprehend?" he said. "Not I," I replied. "Then you are not of the Brotherhood." "How?" "You are not of the Masons." "Yes, yes," I said. "Yes, yes." "You? Impossible. A Mason?" "A mason," I replied. "A sign," he said. "It is this," I answered, producing a trowel from beneath the folds of my roquelaire. "You jest," he exclaimed, recoiling a few paces. "But let us proceed to the Amontillado." "Be it so," I said, replacing the tool beneath the cloak and again offering him my arm. He leaned upon it heavily. We continued our route in search of the Amontillado. We passed through a range of low arches, descended, passed on, and descended again, arriving at a deep crypt, in which the foulness of the air caused our flambeaux rather to glow than flame. At the most remote end of the crypt there appeared another, less spacious. Its walls had been lined with human remains overhead, in the fashion of the great catacombs of Paris. 3 sides of this interior crypt were still ornamented in this manner. From the fourth, the bones had been thrown down and lay promiscuously upon the earth, forming at one point a mound of some size. Within the wall thus exposed by the displacing of the bones, we perceived a still interior recess, in depth about 4 feet, in width 3, in height 6 or 7. It seemed to have been constructed for no special use within itself, but formed merely the interval between 2 of the colossal supports of the roof of the catacombs, and was backed by one of their circumscribing walls of solid granite. It was in vain that Fortunato, uplifting his dull torch, endeavored to pry into the depths of the recess. Its termination the feeble light did not enable us to see. "Proceed," I said. "Herein is the Amontillado. As for Luchesi—" "He is an ignoramus," interrupted my friend, as he stepped unsteadily forward while I followed immediately at his heels. In an instant he had reached the extremity of the niche, and finding his progress arrested by the rock, stood stupidly bewildered. A moment more, and I had fettered him to the granite. In its surface were 2 iron staples, distant from each other about 2 feet horizontally. From one of these depended a short chain, from the other a padlock. Throwing the links about his waist, it was but the work of a few seconds to secure it. He was too much astounded to resist. Withdrawing the key, I stepped back from the recess. "Pass your hand," I said, "over the wall. You cannot help feeling the nitre. Indeed, it is very damp. Once more let me implore you to return. No? Then I will positively leave you. But I must first render you all the little attentions in my power." "The Amontillado!" ejaculated my friend, not yet recovered from his astonishment. "True," I replied, "the Amontillado." As I said these words, I busied myself among the pile of bones of which I have before spoken. Throwing them aside, I soon uncovered a quantity of building stone and mortar. With these materials and with the aid of my trowel, I began vigorously to wall up the entrance of the niche. I had scarcely laid the first tier of my masonry when I discovered that the intoxication of Fortunato had in great measure worn off. The earliest indication I had of this was a low, moaning cry from the depth of the recess. It was not the cry of a drunken man. There was then a long and obstinate silence. I laid the second tier, and the third, and the fourth, and then I heard the furious vibrations of the chain. The noise lasted for several minutes, during which, that I might hearken it with more satisfaction, I ceased my labors and sat down upon the bones. When at last the clinking subsided, I resumed the trowel, and finished without interruption the 5th, the 6th, and the 7th tier. The wall was now nearly upon a level with my breast. I again paused, and holding the flambeau over the mason work, threw a few feeble rays upon the figure within. A succession of loud and shrill screams, bursting suddenly from the throat of the chained form, seemed to thrust me violently back. For a brief moment I hesitated. I trembled. Unsheathing my rapier, I began to grope with it about the recess, but the thought of an instant reassured me. I placed my hand upon the solid fabric of the catacombs and felt satisfied. I reapproached the wall. I replied to the yells of him who clamored. I re-echoed. I aided. I surpassed them in volume and in strength. I did this, and the clamorer grew still. It was now midnight, and my task was drawing to a close. I had completed the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th tier. I had finished a portion of the last and the 11th. There remained but a single stone to be fitted and plastered in. I struggled with its weight. I placed it partially in its destined position. But now there came from out the niche a low laugh that erected the hairs upon my head. It was succeeded by a sad voice, which I had difficulty in recognizing as that of the noble Fortunato. The voice said, "Ha, ha, ha! A very good joke indeed. An excellent jest. We will have many a rich laugh about it at the palazzo. Over our wine. The Amontillado, I said. Yes, the Amontillado. But is it not getting late? Will they not be awaiting us at the palazzo? The Lady Fortunato and the rest? Let us be gone. Yes, I said. Let us be gone. For the love of God, Montresor. Yes, I said, for the love of God. But to these words I hearkened in vain for a reply. I grew impatient. I called aloud, Fortunato! No answer. I called again, Fortunato! No answer still. I thrust a torch through the remaining aperture and let it fall within. There came forth in return only a jingling of the bells. My heart grew sick on account of the dampness of the catacombs. I hastened to make an end of my labor. I forced the last stone into its place. I plastered it up. Again the new masonry I re-erected the old rampart of bones. For the half of a century no mortal has disturbed them. In pace, requiescat.
I love it. You did such an amazing job. You know, Poe. Amazing.
Poe.
I love the imagery of the catacombs with like the dripping water and oh yeah, come in here. Got some amazing wine. I mean, I'm sure you wouldn't want to try it. But there's some amazing wine in here if you're interested.
It might be the death of you. Turn around, please.
Yeah, please. You have a cold. You don't need to be in here. And you did such an amazing job reading it.
Oh, well, thank you.
I think we're missing out on a talent here.
Oh, well.
You should do all the campfire stories. That was amazing.
You are too kind. You are too kind. But you know what? It's really Edgar Allan Poe who deserves all the credit.
I know. It's just so macabre. And so, again, that like the description of like the dampness and the darkness. Mm-hmm. It's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that.
Well, it was my pleasure. And see, I have a very prominent positive memory of my first introduction to Edgar Allan Poe. I was in 9th grade. It was my classic literature class, and Miss Jess was the literature teacher. She was also the art teacher, and so I just loved her. She had beautiful, wild, curly hair. She wore flowy, bohemian clothes, and she told us that literature and art was meant to make us experience something. It wasn't there just to look or sound pretty.
You know what? Fabulous teachers are so underrated.
So underrated. And she really stood out because I went to a conservative private school. This was after elementary school, and Stephanie and I went to different schools. But this was still a conservative private school. So she really stood out as a teacher. She was not like the normal teacher.
Right.
But in this class, she introduced us to two authors who have had great influence on my life. William Shakespeare.
Yeah.
And Edgar Allan Poe.
Yeah.
The Cask of Amontillado was the first piece I ever read by Poe. So I'm really happy that I got to bring it today.
Oh.
And I'm also pretty sure it's why I'm claustrophobic.
Well, we're not going to plaster you into any catacombs, but I get why that would be concerning.
Yeah, I still remember that feeling because at the time, you know, I was young, I was 9th grade, and I remember never having heard anything so awful.
Yeah. And
just being like, wow, this is
and then we present it too, like with the laughing and everything, like like laughing. And I love it. The aficionado being like, are we going to that party? Like, because you're trying to think of anything you can do. How do I get this like insane person to let me out?
Yes. Yes. Ooh. Very, very scary. But Stephanie, you were actually the one who turned me on to this. I was unaware that Edgar Allan Poe's death is also shrouded in mystery.
You know, I mean, he was in death as he was in life.
He really was. His death actually could have been one of his writings.
Yes.
So let me tell you a little bit Edgar Allan Poe.
Yes.
Edgar Poe was born in Boston, Massachusetts on January 19th, 1809. And shout out to all my Boston friends and family. Love Boston. Edgar's parents, David and Elizabeth, were both traveling actors, which is a pretty cool gig. But tragically, Edgar was orphaned by the time he was only 3 years old.
Oh, gosh. I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So his father, David, either died or abandoned him. I actually read both pretty prevalently. So I'm not sure which is actually accurate, but either way,
out of the picture.
out of the picture. And then his mother, Eliza, she went by Eliza, contracted tuberculosis before dying on December 8th, 1811, at only 24 years old.
Oh, that's brutal.
Well, worse than that, she left behind 3 children.
3?
3.
Okay.
And they were separated, and Edgar was sent to Richmond, Virginia to live with his godfather, a wealthy tobacco merchant named John Allan, and his wife, Frances. Now, Edgar was never officially adopted, and this was a result of constant tensions between him and his foster father, John.
Okay.
He didn't take their last name, Allan, but instead he became Edgar Allan Poe.
Okay.
It appears Edgar knew his calling right away. He knew he wanted to be a writer because during his childhood, he idolized the 19th century British romantic poet Lord Byron so much that he began writing poetry. And by the time he was 13 years old, he'd written enough that he was able to compile his poems into a book, and he submitted this book to be published.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Wow.
Right, at 13. The publishers were really interested in the work, but the headmaster of Poe's school asked John Allan to disallow its publication, and he did.
Oh, was there a reason given?
I didn't see the reason. I kind of just chalked it up to maybe he wanted him to focus more on school, or, I mean, I'm really just assuming, or maybe they were in the middle of one of their disagreements.
Right. Oh, that's unfortunate.
It is. But thankfully, Edgar didn't let this stop him. And at 18 years old, he published Tamerlane and other poems. But this was not going to be his big break. Only 50 copies of this were printed, and they were sent to stores for purchase, but they were anonymously credited to, quote, a Bostonian, end quote.
Oh, okay.
Like a ghostwriter before there were ghostwriters.
Yeah, exactly.
In 1826, Poe enrolled in the University of Virginia. He left behind a fiancée, Elmira Royster, who promised to wait for him until he returned back home. And at the University of Virginia, Edgar was an excellent student. But despite the fact that John Allan was making a very comfortable living, he was pretty tight with his purse strings. So he only gave Edgar 1/3 of the money he would need to actually get through school.
Okay.
So what do you do if you're a college kid and need money?
Well, if you have the talent to write, I suppose you write. Or maybe you write papers for other students.
See, you would have succeeded. Poe decided to take up gambling.
Oh, okay. Come on. Just use your talents. I mean, you would still be cheating, I suppose, if you wrote papers for someone else. But I don't know that gambling would have been the direction I would have gone.
Well, then you may not be surprised to hear this didn't pay off. And instead of making money, Poe must have lost the little money he had. And
no.
I read that he was around $2,000 in debt, which, you know, back in these days is quite a bit in debt.
I imagine that didn't earn him a lot of respect from his foster dad, John Allan, either.
Ding, 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 ding.
Yeah, that didn't earn him any credit.
It actually continued the cycle. So John Allan is now mad at Edgar for wasting the money away. But Edgar is really mad at John Allan for not providing him with the full tuition in the first place.
Uh-huh.
So that didn't help that relationship. And it's even rumored that Poe was in such a bad place that he had to start burning his furniture to stay warm. That may just be a rumor, but I thought it was interesting, so I wanted to.
That's pretty dire if that is indeed the case.
Yeah, that's pretty bad. Eventually, Edgar felt he had no other choice but to drop out of school and return home. Now, in case Edgar wasn't having a hard enough time already, fate decided to kick him while he was down, which is going to be a reoccurring theme in this story. Spoiler alert.
You don't get dark for no reason.
Right. When Edgar got home, he learned that his fiancée had become engaged to another man.
Whoops.
While Edgar was off at the University of Virginia, her father had intercepted his letters and steered her in the direction of another man who promised to be a successful businessman and a respectable citizen. Two things Edgar could not promise.
I did not realize how much Edgar Allan Poe and The Notebook have in common.
You know what? I didn't make that connection till just now, and that's one of my favorite movies ever.
Here we go. Just imagine it with more like gray tones.
Well, just wait, because there's gonna... Just wait. They may have more in common than you think.
Okay, let's do it.
With the feeling there was really nothing else for him to do, Edgar moved to Boston and joined the Army. Now, Poe did exceptionally well in the Army, rising to the rank of sergeant major in just 2 years. Edgar then enrolled in West Point, but only 8 months into his education there, he decided not to attend any classes or drills for a week, and he was promptly expelled.
Yeah, that's probably not going to work.
Edgar decided to go visit his father's family in Baltimore, see if maybe he had better luck there. But even that didn't go smoothly, as he ended up being robbed by one of his very own family members.
Oops.
Eventually, Edgar was able to move in with his Aunt Maria Clem and her daughter, Virginia. And while living under the safety they provided, he was able to start publishing poems and short stories. This is where things appeared to turn around for him. Edgar entered and won a writing contest, which ultimately helped land him a job as an editor at the Southern Literary Messenger in Richmond. And there, Edgar published Metzengerstein, which is considered his first horror story, and Berenice, which was so graphic and terrifying that the magazine received multiple complaints from readers.
Oh, shoot.
So I got to find a copy of that.
Yeah.
Somewhere I have a book of his complete works. And so I assume it's even these before, I assume it's
says
complete.
Complete.
Right. And I wanted to pull it out for this episode, but I'm not exactly sure where it is.
Didn't you just do a purge of your house too?
Well, and here's the thing. I cannot imagine having purged that book. I cannot imagine having purged it. So I do have one bookshelf that literally goes up to my ceiling, and I think it's probably on the top tier of that.
Probably.
Because I don't think I would have ever gotten rid of that.
I just meant like you just did a purge, so you should be able to find it.
Well, I know where all my books are, which is why I'm thinking it's on the top.
It's got to
tier.
be there.
It's on the top, or I mean, literally touching the ceiling. Because, I live in a Beauty and the Beast style castle with the library.
You have to get on your sliding ladder to go reach the top of your bookshelf.
In my dreams. Edgar's love life was about to take a positive turn as well, because in 1835, at 27 years old, Edgar married his Aunt Maria's daughter, his 13-year-old cousin, Virginia.
That's not normal.
Well, there is much debate about the nature of their relationship. Poe often referred to Virginia as Sissy, which some people interpret to mean sister. Now, I will tell you, my family's from the South, Kentucky South. And Sissy is actually just a nickname for like a little girl in a family.
Right.
So like a mom might call her daughter Sissy. Hey,
right.
Sissy, come here. So I can see this being like a nickname for someone who you look at as a
pet
sister.
Name.
Yeah. He also called Maria Muddy, which I guess was kind of short for mother.
That's rough.
Yeah.
My kids better not call me that.
Muddy. I kind of like it. It's kind of cute. Hey, Muddy. All right.
Well, I can start calling you that, and we'll just see how it goes.
I'm not going to be as offended as you think I am.
Okay. We'll give it a go.
Many people totally presume that this marriage was really just convenience. It was a perfectly appropriate, what we deem appropriate these days, familial type relationship. But of course, we don't have any way of really knowing what happened.
Muddy, I need the facts right now.
I got a lot of these facts from the Poe Museum, which I think is probably just about as accurate as you're going to get.
Oh, well, one would hope.
They didn't know, so I don't know. We do know Virginia and Maria had a stabilizing effect on Poe. He definitely seemed to be more responsible and happier during the years that they were all together.
Sounds like it.
However, he did continue to suffer money troubles. Today, Edgar Allan Poe is considered America's first professional writer. And in the research, it was literally in parentheses, starving artist.
Starving artist. Yeah, you flip to it in the dictionary and there's this picture.
Right. Because, as we know, this can be irregular work and therefore an irregular paycheck. But I did think that was super interesting that who's the first person on record to make a living just writing.
Right.
But because of these money issues, the couple's living situation was very unstable, and they moved all up and down the East Coast. Edgar was able to find odd jobs writing, but it was never really enough to meet the couple's needs. In 1840, Edgar published his first collection of short stories, Tales of the Grotesque and Arabesque, which contains the very famous piece, The Fall of the House of Usher.
Right.
This was Edgar's big break. But unfortunately, instead of being compensated with cash, he was paid with 25 copies of his own book.
Well, that will buy you dinner.
It was not until 5 years later that the New York Mirror published Poe's most famous piece. Do you know what that is? The Raven.
Oh, yeah, that would be an obvious one.
Once published in the early months of 1845, this poem made Edgar an overnight success. Now, before the publication, Poe was well known in literary circles, but because of The Raven, Edgar Allan Poe became a household name. Now, although Poe only made around $15 from the publication of The Raven, its international success created financial opportunities like taking on literary clients and giving lectures and recitations. Even with this newfound fame, for most of Poe's adulthood, he struggled to financially support himself and his family. And unfortunately for Edgar Allan Poe, no good luck streak ever lasted. 2 years later, Virginia died of tuberculosis at only 24 years old.
Oh, the same age as his mom?
Isn't that interesting?
Ooh, I don't like that.
Really sad. Unfortunately, Edgar would never emotionally recover from this great loss. And 2 years later, he would follow her into the dark. Now, throughout his life, Edgar also struggled with alcoholism. But he also had periods where he would get sober and attempt to stay sober. Unfortunately, after Virginia's death, he turned back to alcohol to cope with the pain. At the beginning of 1849, the population of New York City was 515,547. When a cholera epidemic broke out that spring, about 100,000 of those people fled the city, including Edgar Allan Poe, who decided to return to Richmond, but sadly, he was unable to leave before becoming infected with what was known as Blue Death.
Oh, no.
Now, 1800s medicine is pretty terrifying.
Yeah, primitive.
That's a nice way of putting it. There were various remedies for cholera, including prescribing opium, mercury pills, and oil of turpentine. And if these failed to produce results, the doctor might perform tobacco smoke enemas, or what sounds to me like the most awful, the doctor might attempt to administer beeswax plugs to stop the diarrhea associated with the disease.
Oh, gosh. I feel like these things are sure to kill you.
That one for sure would definitely, first of all, not only would it be incredibly painful, and also I think impossible. But
pretty sure out is better than in.
Yeah. You'd get all kinds of sick.
Yeah.
Ooh. And I don't even know how you do a tobacco smoke enema.
I don't want to know.
Now, this is interesting. I mentioned my family's from the South. So, tried and true earache remedy, I guess. If you have an earache, blow a little tobacco smoke, like take a puff of a cigarette and blow it into the infected ear, and we swear it takes the pain away.
I wonder if it has some kind of antiseptic qualities to it,
I'm
tobacco
sure.
smoke.
I'm sure. Because that's literally what they did growing up. My mom swears her earaches would stop.
Or maybe it's just placebo. Who knows?
That summer, Edgar wrote his aunt/mother-in-law. I had to stop for...
We're going to pass for dramatic effect here.
Quote, "I have been so ill, have had the cholera, or spasms quite as bad, and can now hardly hold the pen. The very instant you get this, come to me. The joy of seeing you will almost compensate for our sorrows. We can but die together. It is no use to reason with me now. I must die. For your sake it would be sweet to live, but we must die together." End quote.
I have thoughts. First of all, when you've got stomach issues, you feel like you're gonna die.
Sure.
Or like it would be better if you did.
Yes.
It's awful.
Awful. And especially if you've got a plug keeping you from...
Oh my gosh.
I mean, it's not funny, but come on.
No, it's not. That's not gonna work. But also, you don't hearken people there with you. I mean, I'm assuming she's not ill.
I mean, I'm assuming, but this is Edgar Allan Poe. I would almost be upset if he didn't hearken me with him.
Okay, fair enough. A time for a party.
Poe wrote New York at the top of the page, but he probably wrote it in nearby Philadelphia, which was also suffering from a cholera epidemic. 12 days later, he wrote his friend E.H.N. Patterson that he had, quote, "barely escaped with my life," end quote, from the cholera epidemic.
Okay, so healed, getting better.
Yes.
No more beeswax plugs.
Thank God. I mean, just... Right? Oy!
No.
On August 7th, Poe wrote Patterson that he had, quote, "suffered worse than death. Not so much from the cholera as from its long continued consequences in debility and congestion of the brain.
Yeah.
The latter possibly attributable to the calomel taken. Calomel was a medicine derived from toxic mercury, in case you were wondering.
So probably true.
Probably. And another one of those potentially dangerous remedies doctors of the time often prescribed to those suffering from a variety of illnesses.
Yeah, that must stink. Like, you survived the illness, but now the medicine's just going to take you out. Just a bunch of mercury.
Right. Because we know that's good for you.
No good.
By the end of the 1849 epidemic, cholera had claimed 150,000 American lives.
Cholera and its treatment had claimed.
I wonder how many
lives.
of those are because of the treatment.
And it's not like they weren't doing their best, but I mean, think of it for modern medicine.
Okay, so if you don't know anything about cholera, it's a stomach, an upset stomach type disease, but very, very violent.
Yes.
So if you think back, 1800s, it probably did make sense to them. Well, if we stop this from happening, maybe we'll heal the person.
Right.
So I can see how if you don't know anything about modern medicine, how that might make sense. But nowadays we know that's not going to work.
Oh, for a patient. What a miserable existence.
Terrible. Now, just as Edgar was never far from tragedy, he was also prone to things turning around in a positive direction, as we've seen time and time again. And one of these instances occurred when, upon moving back home to Richmond, Edgar ran into his first fiancée, Elmira, who was now a wealthy widow, and they once again became engaged. That's where the Notebook comes back.
Oh my gosh. Look at that.
Mm-hmm. Poe planned to move permanently to Richmond to be with Elmira, but first he planned a trip to New York to bring Maria, his mother-in-law, back to Richmond. He was also planning to see a client in Philadelphia on the way up the coast. Poe's last day in Richmond was on September 26, 1849, and Elmira was worried about his health. After his illness, his health had been quite fragile, and so she encouraged him to visit his doctor, who was also a friend. And Poe did make this visit, but it was primarily a social visit. He had a late meal at Sadler's Restaurant, and at 4 a.m. on September 27, 1849, Edgar Allan Poe boarded a steamer ship headed for Baltimore. From September 27th until October 3rd, there was no record of his whereabouts.
This is where it gets weird.
On October 3rd, an employee of the Baltimore Sun, Joseph Walker, found 40-year-old Edgar Allan Poe in a gutter outside Gunner's Hall Tavern, which was being used as a polling place. Edgar was dressed in dirty, shabby clothing that appeared to not belong to him. He was completely out of sorts and immobile. Walker stopped and asked Poe if he had any acquaintances in Baltimore who might be able to help him, and Poe gave Walker the name of Joseph E. Snodgrass, a magazine editor with some medical training. Immediately, Walker wrote Snodgrass a letter asking for help. It reads, "Dear Sir, there is a gentleman, rather the worse for wear, at Ryan's Fourth Ward polls, who goes under the cognomen of Edgar A. Poe, and who appears in great distress, and he says he is acquainted with you. He is in need of immediate assistance. Yours in haste, J.O.S.W. Walker."
Well, thank goodness he said in haste, so that letter gets there quickly.
Right?
I mean, it's like, I need help immediately. Please, postman,
Please hurry.
Take this letter.
But this was the reality of the time. It's not like they had cell phones.
It's so wild.
I know. In the meantime, Poe was taken to Washington College Hospital, where there was a special room just for patients suffering from side effects of intoxication. At this point, that appears to be what...
the primary concern?
Sure.
But he's wearing clothes that aren't his.
Right.
Okay.
Once in the hospital, Edgar went in and out of consciousness, but would never fully wake up. When questioned about what had happened to him or how he got to be in the position he was in, his responses were incoherent. He was not allowed visitors as he was considered too excitable. Dr. John Moran wrote to Maria Klim saying that Edgar's last days were filled with, quote, "vacant converse with spectral and imaginary objects on the walls. His face was pale and his whole person drenched in perspiration," end quote.
Oh, so he's like full on hallucinating.
Poe died quietly before sunrise on Sunday, October 7th, 1849. And some witnesses say that in his last breath, Edgar said, "Lord, help my poor soul." Now, I know that there is a rumor going around that Poe actually yelled out a man's name.
Yeah.
I did not find that anywhere where it could be legitimized as having actually happened.
Really?
Mm-hmm. According to thepoemuseum.com, he may have yelled, "Lord, help my poor soul."
Maybe that was tied in with the hallucinations. Maybe he was hallucinating a person.
Could be.
And he said a name.
Could be.
That's where that came from?
Could be. Yeah. I didn't say anything saying it didn't happen. I didn't read anything about it. That was the weird thing.
I just listened to a podcast that said he said this name. Like it was fact.
And again, he absolutely may have, because he was, saying things, vacant converse.
Okay.
But, I was trying to go off of stuff that could,
Yeah.
that was actually fact.
Corroborated. Sure.
Right. And so I kind of felt like this was the best website to
yeah.
I mean, I looked at several different sources and none of them actually said for sure this happened.
Okay.
So I guess we'll never know.
Yeah. It's still weird.
Totally weird. And again, he may have said it during one of these times when he's, speaking incoherently.
But it wasn't like one of his last words. It wasn't something that anybody thought meant something.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Got it.
The official cause of death was phrenitis or brain swelling. However, no autopsy was performed. Edgar was buried in a Baltimore graveyard 2 days later in an unmarked grave.
Wow.
Now, there are several theories surrounding Poe's death, from the possible to the totally bizarre, and I couldn't possibly discuss all of them with you, but I will go over some of the most popular. One of the most prominent is that Edgar suffered from some alcohol-related disease.
Okay.
This makes sense. He suffered from, alcohol addiction throughout his whole life. And there's even a theory that Poe possibly suffered from a genetic inability to tolerate alcohol, which would have, one, harmed his body, and two, made him, like, one drink would have affected him much more strongly.
I've heard of this. Yeah. You get inebriated much quicker because
Right.
your body doesn't like metabolize alcohol.
Right.
Okay.
And here's something I only recently learned in like the last couple of years. I have this.
Let's go get some drinks.
But the thing is,
but you really do.
I really do. And mine shows up less so in the, like, one drink makes me buzz, but one drink will show up in my blood work as if I drank a lot.
Oh, so you don't necessarily feel the effects. However, if you were to have a breathalyzer, it would be a lot higher.
Right. Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
How did you figure this out?
So I went and had random blood work, and my doctor's like, "So are
you a functioning alcoholic?"
Pretty much. And I said, "No, I hardly ever drink. I mean, like, I may buy one bottle of wine a month and
Right.
I don't drink half of it. Like,
Right.
and that's the truth.
Yeah.
And he said, the night before your blood work, did you happen to have a glass of wine? And I said, you know what? As a matter of fact, I did. He said, okay, well, it is very, very rare. But there are some people who literally cannot tolerate alcohol.
Wow.
And you are one of them. Now, does it also affect me in the other way? Possibly. I mean, I've always thought I was a lightweight. A glass of wine could absolutely make me feel buzzed, but I just assumed it was because I don't drink.
Right. So you don't have much tolerance.
Right. So could it be more than that? Yes. But all that to say, I have to be really careful. And I would never, ever have more than, maybe one glass of wine or something.
Yeah, you and I have hung out a lot, and neither of us are like big drinkers. We may have a glass of wine.
Right.
So it's never been a big deal. Interesting.
Yeah. And also kind of sad, kind of a bummer. Not that I'm a drinker. I mean, I'm not.
It would have been if you actually consumed on a regular basis, but you don't. So
I don't, but now I feel like I can't, which...
Oh, come on. You can't lose something you never had you can't lose something you never had, right?
I know, but for like, if I'm on vacation and I want to have 2 cocktails, now I have to be like, what am I doing to my liver?
Oh, come on.
Now, alcohol abuse plagued Poe so much that in the last months of his life, Edgar became a member of the Sons of Temperance, which was a society founded in 1842 to campaign against alcohol consumption. And
wow.
I know. And listen to this. This is kind of crazy. To join the society, he had to pledge, quote, I am now fully determined to renounce this destructive beverage from this day to the day of my death. Yes, I do renounce it fully, totally, end quote.
That is intense.
I mean, right? Like that, I would be afraid to take a drink after seeing those.
Yes. Wow. I didn't realize anything like that actually existed in the 1800s.
It did. And some people think that might be what got him, how he died, is maybe somebody didn't like the fact that he was such an active member of the society, and maybe that played into his death.
Oh, okay.
Now, theory number 2 is that Edgar Allan Poe was fatally beaten. If he had been a victim of robbery, that could explain why his expensive clothing was missing and he was in such disarray and appearing so disheveled, because that was something that those close to him say was completely unlike Poe. For him to be looking shabby, wearing shabby clothes, that was not...
And dirty.
Dirty, right. That was unlike him. Furthering this theory is the idea that Elmira Shelton's brothers and children did not like the idea of Edgar Allan Poe marrying Elmira. So maybe they beat him to death.
Oh, they followed him all the way to Baltimore?
Actually, yes, that's how this theory goes. Now, I will say I didn't read anything about him being covered in bruises or...
But if they said brain swelling, maybe he had like a contusion to his head or something?
Potentially. It's definitely one of the more prominent theories.
Huh.
Theory number 3, this one's really interesting, is that Poe was a victim of cooping. So one of the most popular theories is that Edgar Allan Poe was a victim of cooping, and cooping victims were kidnapped, drugged, or forced to drink, and disguised several times in order to cast several votes. As ridiculous as this sounds, cooping was a very common method of voter fraud in the 19th century. Adding to the plausibility of this theory is that Poe was found on election day. And again, this could explain why he was acting intoxicated if he really was drugged and or forced to drink. And sometimes after voting, back in this time, after you voted, you'd be given a drink.
Oh, right. Okay, I could see that.
So what if he was not only drugged or forced to drink and then vote, but then also every time he voted, given another drink? That could absolutely explain.
And he may have this metabolic disorder where he doesn't metabolize the wine. Wow.
Right. So for me, this could have actually been what happened.
So it has nothing to do with who he is. It's just he was the victim.
In this theory.
Yeah. Okay. Wow.
Theory number 4, and I actually think this one is probably the most plausible, is that Edgar Allan Poe died as a result of a brain tumor. And this theory could also explain all of the strange behavior in Poe's last days, and even, honestly, the years leading up to his death, because as we know, brain tumors can absolutely affect behavior and all kinds of other health issues.
But just his macabre imagery and everything, you do wonder, where did that come from?
Exactly. After being buried in the unmarked grave, 26 years after his death, a statue was placed near Edgar Allan Poe's gravesite. Now, side note, with the record keeping not being what it is now, the date of his birth on the statue was January 20th, which was actually the day after he was born.
Oh, no.
And at the same time this statue was erected, Poe's body was exhumed. Totally befitting its owner, Poe's coffin had deteriorated so badly that when workers attempted to move it, it fell apart and Poe's remains spilled out. And I fact-checked that. That did happen.
Of course it
Because I was
did.
like, that didn't really happen. That
Of course
happened.
he did.
Get this. When his remains spilled, it was reported by witnesses that a hard ball or mass was seen rolling around in his skull.
Oh.
Now, at the time, this was believed to be his brain.
Right.
And they thought it had just dried and shriveled over
Yeah.
the years. But we now know that's not possible because the brain is actually one of the first organs to decay because it's such soft tissue.
Full of water, yeah.
However, a brain tumor could have absolutely calcified and hardened and be found as a hard mass in a skull nearly 3 decades after a body was buried.
No way.
So I think that too is kind of a plausible explanation.
Wow.
There has been expert testimony that Edgar had been told earlier in his life that he had a lesion on his brain, and this alleged lesion could have been what caused his negative reaction to alcohol.
Right.
As I mentioned, there are so many other theories, from rabies to carbon monoxide poisoning, the flu. Interestingly, nothing that I saw said, we just didn't like Edgar Allan Poe.
Right. Okay.
The closest was, if someone didn't want him marrying, somebody, but nothing was just like
a family dispute, basically.
Sure, but nothing was like we targeted him because of who he was. This October 7th marked the 175th anniversary of the death of Edgar Allan Poe. And after all of these years, his death is still surrounded in mystery. And something tells me that's exactly how he would want it.
Oh, yes, he would.
So let me give you a little bit of Edgar Allan Poe trivia. So if this Halloween you win a trivia game because of some of these facts, I want you to think of me. Edgar Allan Poe is credited with coining the word tinabulation to describe the sound of ringing bells.
Oh, okay.
Poe was featured on a 3-cent U.S. postage stamp in 1949 and appeared on the sleeve of the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band.
Oh, interesting.
All of Poe's stories take place at night, and if a day scene is required, it is always the bleakest, foulest day of the year. Edgar Allan Poe really wanted to become a Freemason, but they refused to consider him for membership. And if you go back to the campfire story I told you in the beginning, there's a little couple lines about that.
He was a Freemason.
Right. The only major American sports team named after a literary work is the NFL's Baltimore Ravens. Poe lived and worked in Baltimore, and the franchise named itself after Poe's poem, The Raven.
I did not know that.
Yep.
That's cool.
And apparently they have 3 mascots. One's named Edgar, one's Alan, and one's Poe.
Get out.
Mm-hmm. And my favorite little bit of Poe trivia is every year on the anniversary of Edgar Allan Poe's birthday, a mystery man leaves a bottle of cognac and roses on Poe's grave.
I've heard that. Like somebody started doing it and then somebody kept doing it, right?
We have to assume, and hopefully they continue.
Forever.
Right? I mean, that's just cool.
This is fun. This might be one of my favorite episodes.
Oh, I'm so glad you liked it.
Love it.
I want to end the episode with a short poem written by Poe, and I personally believe it's probably autobiographical. It's titled Alone. From childhood's hour, I have not been as others were. I have not seen as others saw. I could not bring my passions from a common spring. From the same source, I have not taken my sorrow. I could not awaken my heart to joy at the same tone. And all I loved alone. Then, in my childhood, in the dawn of a most stormy life, was drawn from every depth of good and ill, the mystery which binds me still, from the torrent or the fountain, from the red cliff of the mountain, from the sun that round me rolled in its autumn tint of gold, from the lightning in the sky as it passed me flying by, from the thunder and the storm, and the cloud that took the form, while the rest of heaven was blue, of a demon in my view.
Oh, snap! Happy Halloween!
Happy Halloween!
Oh, I love it.
One last quote from Poe. Words have no power to impress the mind without the exquisite horror of their reality.
Yikes.
Ain't it the truth?
He ain't wrong.
Ooh. Wow. That's why I was like, hold on.
And you're like, wait.
One more quote.
I got another one. I can't stop. I got another one.
Oh, it's good. It's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. I love that we decided to cover this.
Hey, this was your request. So
well, we were thinking, what's
all
kind
props
of
to you.
What's kind of a little macabre, a little dark, but something that may be a little atypical, and this fit the bill, and I am not disappointed.
Well, I'm so glad. And listeners, we hope you guys are Poe fans. And if you're not, I hope that we introduced you to an author that maybe you can do some exploring. I'm telling you, I had a hard time narrowing down what of his works to read. There were several. The Raven's really good.
Yeah, we know there are a good number of young people that listen to our podcast. I mean, that made me feel like I was 70 years old when I said that. But, a lot of teenagers, and guys, get into some of these works.
Absolutely. And many of them have been made nowadays into like miniseries, movies. I mean, The House of the Fall of Usher is all over Netflix. I think it came out last year, maybe the year before. Lots of, he's a master.
Yeah. It's crazy too, because I think we're going to cover Agatha Christie in one of our Patreon cases, and she's the queen of mystery.
That's right.
And I think about all the works that have, that she's inspired.
Right.
I love it.
Yeah. These people are the real deal.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so fun. All right. Well, I guess all there is to do to wrap up October 2024, Oaktober Fest 2024, is to talk about our branch of hope.
Yes, and it's a really sweet one. It's a really cute one.
It is. So we covered it, I guess, 5 episodes ago now at the beginning of October. It is Best Friends Society, and their goal is to save them all. And they want to do that by converting all shelters in the United States into no-kill shelters. That means trying to find permanent homes, trying to find foster homes, trying to find programs that can help with spay and neuter for animals, help people keep their pets at home by providing services, vet care, food, those kinds of things. They're just a really, really great organization, and I'm so pleased that we were able to support them in the month of October. If you would like to donate, you can find their information on our website, our social media pages. Also, a portion of all of our Patreon and sponsor profits will go directly to them. So one way you can help support these great organizations is by joining our Patreon. You get a bunch of amazing Patreon episodes. You get to chat with Cynthia and I, and a portion of your subscription automatically goes to our nonprofit organization every month. You don't have to do anything.
Yeah, we do it for you.
You just sign up and we give back to the community, which we love doing. Win. We wish you all a safe Halloween a fun Halloween, and we hope it's just full of family time, friend time, snuggly time, spooky time, kind of whatever makes you feel a little bit special. We wish that for you.
And lots of chocolate.
And lots of chocolate. Guys, listen, the kids have to pay a tax, okay? Don't forget. They get the trick-or-treat tax for sure. If you take them trick-or-treating, you get to pick the first 3 items of candy for yourself. That's the tax.
It's a good idea, but you're being very conservative with 3.
3.
No, okay, so I started to say I'm lucky, and then I realized how terrible that sounds. One of my children is allergic to peanut butter, which means I get all the Reese's. I can't say lucky because that's terrible that he's allergic.
You are cruel. That is cruel, Cynthia.
He has no idea what he's missing. He has no idea what listen, I didn't choose for him to be allergic.
One day when he finds you in the closet stuffing all the peanut butter candies in your mouth, he'll know.
He already knows.
He will know.
He knows. He knows. Do these have peanut butter? Yep. Sorry, bud. Sorry. You wouldn't like them. Hey.
The day is coming. You're like, listen, I didn't choose this.
I didn't. And I didn't. But hey, you know, it's a tough job, y'all. But somebody's got to eat the peanut butter Reese cups. And it's not him.
I was doing a little research randomly, like you do, about candies. And it turns out the peanut butter cups are the most popular candy in the United States right now, which, yeah, I understand.
That doesn't surprise me one bit.
No.
Because for me, that's like the perfect pairing. Peanut butter and chocolate, that salt. So you got the savory, you got the sweet. And, their peanut butter has like confectioner sugar in it. Yeah. So it's not just plain peanut. I mean, it's just heaven on earth. Okay. It really is.
Well, I wish you all the peanut butter cups.
Thanks.
All right, folks. We will see you in November.
It's Christmas. Okay, maybe not, but it is at my house.
Wow, that is extreme.
Sorry. Also true at my house.
You can't. No. Listen, I'm here for all the pumpkin pie, guys. I am doing the slow roll. You don't have to get on the Cynthia train. Just do the slow roll.
We got something for everybody. You can be pro early Christmas or enjoy all things fall. Either way, we got what you need.
All right, friends. Have a wonderful evening tonight and a great day and evening tomorrow.
Happy Halloween.
Bye-bye.